Hello, I am East Coast Pete, everyone. Welcome to Mid-Rock Crisis, Mid-Folk Crisis, whatever. Here's another person who I wished I had learned about much earlier. Anne Briggs. So, what's all this fuss about purism and tradition versus new original material and new methods? You can see how synth music versus organic is a thing, but I won't go so far as to condemn folk rock as illegitimate. The image of Pete Seeger angrily pulling at Bob Dylan's power cables at the Newport Folk Festival in 1965 is comically sad, but still an iconic example of times a changin'. Anne Briggs is another iconic scaffold. Richard Thompson, a peer, said about Briggs, "She did to folk music what punk did to rock, and she overshadowed everyone." She and Bert Jansch, together or singly, they overshadowed Jimmy Page. What's more, Page knew it, and he wasn't going to tell. It was a secret. She sang circles around everyone except maybe Sandy Denny. They were contemporaries but not adversaries. It was about the music. It's what Anne Briggs cared about. She liked her menfolk and her drink, but it was all tertiary to the music. Born in 1944, an English vocalist, Anne Howe never wanted to be a commercial success or famous. She was a singer and she played folk instruments, but she didn't see herself as a folk singer, at least not a typical 60s folkster. Throughout most of history, all Western non-classical music was considered folk, in that its purpose was to provide dancers with rhythm and theme. It wasn't till fairly recently that this line has blurred to the point of irrelevance. Briggs' singing sounded like she was transported through time from the 17th century. Her singing directly influenced Sandy Denny, Bert Jansch, Matty Pryor, Jimmy Page, Richard Thompson, and many, many more. In 1959, Anne left home at age 15. She met Bert Jansch at a time when he was just beginning to write his own music. They had an instant rapport. Jansch was enamored by her distinct timbre and her knowledge of romantic forms. She was a gifted interpreter of deep rural music of the British Isles, which she loved. Jansch's music also had a rustic theme, and his interests mirrored hers. She was no damsel in distress. She was an independent woman, world-wise far beyond her years, and she could be as bawdy as well as fragile. And they both liked to drink. They remained friends throughout their lives, sharing adventures on the outskirts of social norms. 1962, England's Congress passed a bill to encourage culture exchanges in the hinterlands. A tour of London musicians was organized in order to involve local talent. At Nottingham, they heard Briggs perform "Let No Man Steal Your Time" and "She Moves Through the Fair." They invited her to go on their stage. She soon became a full member of the tour. She was just 17. She became employed at the Center 42's office as a liaison between performers and venues. Here, she acquired contacts that would help her begin a musical career. She became well known through her performances at the Troubadour in London, as well as folk clubs in Scotland and Ireland. Briggs and Jansch lived in a squat in Earl's Court, but then moved in with guitarist John Renbourn. Briggs and Jansch shared a physical resemblance, and most thought of them as brother and sister. Briggs taught Jansch many of the songs he would go on to record, including Blackwater Side, which appeared on his Jack Orion album, and recorded 2 songs for a theme album released by Topic in 1963. The EP, called The Hazards of Love, was an early inspiration for Matty Pryor and June Tabor. Briggs then teamed up with Hamish Henderson to record A Bird in the Bush, an album of medieval erotica. For the next 4 years, she spent her summers in Ireland riding between clubs and pubs in a horse-drawn carriage. This was not the reclusive retreat she was to have later in life. She admits that she was a wildling, without attachments, taking what came her way. Whether due to her drinking or her wild abandon, her attendance at bookings became erratic. In 1966, she joined the band Sweeney's Men and learned to play the bouzouki, a Greek-stringed long-necked mandolin. She wrote Living by the Water, which would appear on her 1971 album. From 68 to 69, Briggs sang with Pentangle with John Renbourn. She also began recording her first solo album, mostly of traditional, unaccompanied songs released by Topic. Her second album, The Time Has Come, comprised songs she'd written for voice and guitar or bouzouki and was released by CBS. And there was little promotion for either album, and sales were poor. But she had no ill will about it. She appeared in a TV documentary about traditional folk singers, the Wattersons, entitled Traveling for the Living. CBS lost interest in her, citing her lack of commercial success, but they did reissue the album in 1996. Briggs was not on hand at the time. In 1973, she put out a third album backed by the Ragged Robin Band called Sing a Song for You. At the time of the recording, she was pregnant with her second child. By the time of the album's release, she had moved to northern Scotland with her family. She lived on an island in the Outer Hebrides off the coast. She wasn't running away from anything. She just wanted to raise her kids in a place where she liked to be. The third album would be her last. She chose not to return, no matter who asked or coaxed her to return and record again. She appeared in another documentary, this time about Bert Jansch, in 1993. She sang Go Your Way, Love as a duet with Jansch for the show. Jansch described her as one of the most underrated singers. On her Fotheringay album, Sandy Denny wrote The Pond and the Stream as a tribute to Briggs. On Fairport Convention's Watermark album, Leaf and Liege, the melody from Briggs' Willie O. Winsbury song was used on the track Farewell, Farewell. Richard Thompson wrote his well-known song Beeswing about Anne. In 2009, the Decemberists' album, The Hazards of Love, was inspired by Briggs' album of the same name. 1964, The Hazards of Love EP. Number 1, The Lowlands. She Puts You Under a Spell. 2, My Bonnie Boy. Is she his mom or his lady? You can't say. 3, Polly Vaughan. He mistook his true love for a swan, shot her, killed her, but she wouldn't let him hang. He had to live out his days lonely and broken and in sorrowful love of a rare kind. 4, Rosemary Lane, a sea shanty made into a love song. 1966, The Bird in the Bush, with A.L. Lloyd, Frankie Armstrong, Dave Swarbrick, and Alf Edwards. 1, The Two Musicians. 2, The Old Man from Over the Sea. 3. The wanton seed. 4. Gathering rushes in the mouth of May. 5. The bonny black hare. 6. The whirly whirl. 7. Pretty Polly. 8. The old bachelor. 9. The stonecutter boy. 10. The mower. 11. The bird in the bush. 12. The pegging awl. 13. Martin mouse time. 14. The widow of Westmoreland's daughter. And to my American ear, there are just more fine English folk songs, but if you speak the language and listen closely, you might hear some salty stuff. 71. Anne Briggs, Blackwater Side, her most well-known song. 2. The snow, it melts the soonest. She's like nature, and she loves seasonal themes. 3. Willie O. Winsbury. 4. Go Your Way, magic, ancient, and universal. 5. Thorny Moor Woods. 6. The Cuckoo. 7. Reynardine, about a man and a maid. 8. Young Tambling, Trouble for a Young Girl. Became Tam Lin on subsequent albums by bands like Fairport Convention. Living by the Water, more to this than just a landscape. Number 10, Ma Bonnie Lad, because he found himself another girl. 72, The Time Has Come. 1, Sandman Song. 2, High Lodge Hare. 3, Fire and Wine. 4, Step Right Up. 5, Ride, Ride. 6, The Time Has Come. 7, Clea Caught a Rabbit. 8, Tangled Man. 9, Wishing Well. 10, Standing on the Shore, a traditional mute. Tide Wave. 12, Every Time. And 13, Fine Horseman. And finally in 97, Sing a Song for You. Hills of Greenmore. Sing a Song for You. Sauve. 4, I Thought I Saw You Again. 5, Summer In. 6, Traveling's Easy. 7, The Bonham Buoy. 8, Tongue in Cheek. 9, Bird in the Bush. And 10, Sullivan's John. And one more item of note. Anne Briggs and Sandy Denny were peers, acknowledged each other's gifts, but fame tore Sandy to pieces. Anne is still with us, quite content. And Briggs retired from the music business in 1973. She became a conservation worker, and she bought and sold stocks. Why not? She raised her 2 children, and she loved her friends, and her daughters for the longest time knew nothing of Mom's music career down in London in the 60s and 70s. I'll wager she didn't try to keep it from them. She just didn't think anyone still thought of her as a singing sensation. She didn't even like some of her records. She said they had too much reverb. They weren't authentic. And recordings aren't the same as live music. I wonder what she thinks of auto-tune. Go listen. It's out there. Or listen with me now. Wow. Thanks everybody. Please hit subscribe and hit like if you liked it. Join me next time on Mid-Rock Crisis.